Hello and welcome to Fridays at 4 on twitch.tv/DDOstream. I'm your community manager, Cordovan, here with you for about an hour with the latest news. And if we get to it, maybe a little bit of gameplay, but I don't think we're going to get to it because I've got a guest here today. And that is Tonquin. How you doing, Tonquin? Did I say it
I'm
right,
doing
by
well.
the way? I guess I've only been
Yes.
seeing your name. I haven't been saying your name, so
Yeah. No, that's
yeah.
fine. Hello. I'm a systems designer on Dungeons and Dragons Online. I talk a lot on the forums, love fixing bugs. And yeah, that's me.
And we're mostly here to talk a little bit about some of the Epic Destiny work that you've been involved in. We'll probably get to a little bit of the UI work I know that you've been doing as well, and there's some pretty exciting stuff that's being seen on Lamania, or was seen on Lamania for the first time this week. So if you want to follow along, play the home game here, I would go to the Lamania forums, which I've just dropped a link into chat here. And we're going to go through some of the forum threads. We'll have time for your questions and answers. Do the best we can to just sort of answer things on the fly and go through our first preview of Update 66, which is going to have Epic Destiny stuff in it. It's got the Dragon Lord archetype, which, as I understand, you did not work on. That was someone else, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and some other bits as well. We've got the a tooltip upgrade, AOE ranged attacks, which I think, were you involved in that?
So some of the design work, yes. That being said, I believe Steelstar built that in a fugue state over 2 minutes in the middle of a different meeting. He actually had an epiphany, and was like, "I figured out how to make ranged attacks go AOE because we've been struggling at that for a while." So no, that was all a stroke of individual genius. But
Awesome.
we collaborated a little bit on like which attacks, but
There's also a quest pack with Update 66 as well. We only have one dungeon available for this first preview, but that happened as well. Now, the preview period is over now, but we will have another Lamania preview here in the near future. While we talk here, I'll actually call up and see if we have it listed. But within the next couple of weeks, we should have another preview, I would think, on Lamania, would be my expectation. But why don't we start by talking a little bit, if I can find my link here, with the Epic Destinies, because that's really what we've got you here about today, because we're doing some pretty significant Epic Destiny work. Now, we've been doing some work related to, enhancements and other things really throughout the past year, and this is a little bit like that, but even bigger in scope.
yes. So last year, some of you might have seen, we tried a relatively new type of release cadence for our balance updates where I was able to go through and we modified 30 individual enhancement trees over the course of 3 or 4 updates. And we were focusing on doing just a lot of little things rather than big deep dives. Like historically, when we've committed to a balance pass, it's been very narrow in scope but very deep in depth, where we go down to the brass tacks of what a class or a tree is doing, and we rebuild it from the bottom up into something that involves our newer paradigms. And that was kind of the opposite, where we were looking for a lot of different things that had just been bothering us for a while. And this is kind of a little bit of both for some trees. Like some trees only got like a scatter shot of little bits that we were like, this is almost there. And some trees we really kind of moved things around more seriously. Almost all trees got significant updates on their iconography, their images, their ordering, like borders and stuff like that. But also like a tooltip pass and stuff like that. And so, like, overall, they should look much nicer. And then some of them got more significant, serious balance changes in an effort to, like, pull everything together into a little bit more of a cohesive whole.
We're changing up the meta, aren't we?
Yes,
Yeah, we're doing that
it's
somewhat deliberately.
it's been known to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so when we look at, we'll get into the various trees in the coming minutes here, but for now, let's just talk about everything has gotten some new icons. All mantle ability icons are getting a color-coded border so that, you can just see it more easily and know that it's your mantle.
Yeah, like when like those abilities, they all like you can only have one at a time, and so if you end up with more than one, having them have like they all say Destiny Mantle in that magenta color, and now their borders are magenta as well, so it's like a little bit more of an indicator of like, oh, this is part of that system. And then abilities in the tree that upgrade that mantle have that same magenta border. Um, and
You've
yeah, the
also
same with Epic.
changed all the icons. You said trees have been reordered and rearranged to support more clear prerequisite lines in cases where upgrades are required. So, weren't we already basically doing that though?
Some of them had some of that, yes, but a lot of the trees didn't have that, which meant that it would be possible for you to put action points or destiny points into an ability that technically didn't function. Like you could skip taking the base mantle and you bought some sort of upgrade for it, and it wouldn't do anything. And that's not a big case, but it's important that we prevent people from accidentally doing that. So if something like literally requires the mantle to function, it's going to have an arrow. Um, kind of long and short of it.
Sure. Sure. Just a quick note to chat. I understand I may have had you turned up a little bit too loud,
Oh,
Tonquin, so I've now turned you back down. So you should be coming through a little more clear at this point. So,
gotcha.
okay. All right. So let's go in. Let's just go through the list by alphabet. Draconic Incarnation. What are we doing about Dragon Breath? That's one of the
Um,
first things that we've has been seen as a little bit of a nerf.
yeah, I mean it was quite severe, and then we reran some of the numbers and we pulled that back just a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like the Dragon Breath Epic Strike is very 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 strong. And even with the new numbers, it's still going to be quite strong, but it's not going to be as strong. And we're definitely still looking at different parts of the tree. It's important to
Hmm.
note that like if its cooldown is decreased, it's not like that. Even though the numbers are bad, it's not as proportionate. But like it's still meant to be a pretty heavy hitting ability, and it was easily the strongest of the caster epic strikes. Like the just running the numbers, it was much 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 higher than the other ones.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, and like the as part of the balance though, like while that definitely lost some of its damage, the other ones are getting sometimes exceptionally significant increases. So like we're trying to meet in that middle. Like Dragon Breath is too strong, the other ones are not as strong as we want. So we're trying to get them so where their damage portion is relatively comparable, with a little bit of feathering because some of them are easier to use in terms of targeting. Some are single target, some are AoE, and there's a difference between like a lightning bolt kind of AoE versus a cone kind of an AoE, et cetera, et cetera. It's also cooldown taken into consideration, so not exactly the same damage, but we really don't want them to be that different.
Yeah. So are the numbers that are in the forum original post, has that already changed or is that
That
accurate?
has,
Okay.
and yeah, this we're kind of in a little bit of a strange point when it comes to these kinds of previews where um, editing the original post as successive changes are made. I
It's tough.
kind of makes it's tough to commit to that kind of like the information here is always going to be the most relevant, and it leaves space for people who are just now seeing the original post a few days late to give their authentic reaction to the experience. But at the same time, it is also very confusing because it's like you're right; those numbers are not accurate. Like at the 1d6 plus 3 changed to 1d6 plus 5, and 1d6 plus 7 changed to 1d6 plus 10. And so like you're like we have to figure out some way of preserving the original in a way that would not harm the discussion while still displaying the follow-up without making it so that if a designer wants to jump in on feedback, they also now have to remember to go and make sure that the post has been properly associated.
Yeah, right, right.
And we're still working through that. And our these new forums have
Do
a
you
lot
know
of really
off the
cool
top of your
stuff.
head what the number is right
Yes,
now?
went to 1d6 plus 5 and then 1d6 plus 10.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. All
yeah, a
right.
whole bunch of other stuff has also changed. Like we've gotten some really good feedback on both individual abilities that have been changed, and then also on new cool stuff. And I'll try to call that out where I can. But there have been like 5 or 6 really solid suggestions that I've been really happy to see. Like there's just a really a good. Just a lot of people are very invested in Epic Destinies, and so we've been really lucky. that some of you have some really cool ideas.
It's been one of our bigger forum threads we've had in a while. There's a velocity to some forum discussions that you
Mhm.
only see occasionally, and we definitely saw it when we opened this series of changes to Epic Destinies. So people do care deeply about this stuff, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And we appreciate that as well. Part of the reason this is a first preview and we wanted to get it out in that first preview is so that we could have this discussion and get your feedback and make adjustments where we feel it's warranted and we can and all that other kind of stuff. So, what else should we say about Dragon Breath? It now has a caster level, right? Like max caster level?
Yes, I believe it does have an appropriate max caster level that matches the other ones. And yes, it's like it's a sizable adjustment. Like that being said, as you said, this is only the first preview. Like we've already started making successive changes about in terms of feedback, and we're certainly not done.
Yep.
So like if you have feedback on this sort of stuff, it's not too late. Please let us know what you think. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and the only reason that Dragon Breath and Attune the Arcane swapped places was because I wanted to do a clear prereq line with the Draconic Mantle.
Sure.
So that wasn't even a balance thing. That was purely to make the tree look nicer.
So let's move to Fate Singer then. This, as I understand, really has to deal with DCs of crowd control abilities.
Yeah, Fate Stinger was the odd one out in terms of how its DCs were calculated for its Epic Strike and for its other abilities. It was the only one that picked and chose like individual stats by name rather than either doing the highest of your spellcasting stats or the highest of your total mod. With the exception of, I believe Great Leveler is only physical, which is quite fun, and I like that a lot. But yes, the DC adjustments are about standardization. Like a spell should use the highest of your spellcasting stats. It is an evocation spell, so evocation DCs, and the melee and ranged attacks needs to use the highest of your total ability mod to support people who use your spellcasting stats as your attacks rather than people who just use Dex or Strength. And then we did a little bit of renaming because in the shuffle of the old Epic Destinies to the new Epic Destinies, we accidentally named two things Rain, and we needed to make it so only one thing is named that. So we did a little bit of a handshake because we ended up with two things named the same thing. But that hopefully should have minor adjustments to people's gameplay.
Yeah,
And then there's
rain, rains, raining. We've got three
yes.
options. We can, yeah. So
Yes, there's a bit of an interlude. One of the things we did for this was we're trying to iron down, like in terms of like the individual types of Epic Destinies. The old Epic Destinies they were split by sphere, which is like kind of not so much gameplay, but as in the type of magic and or non-magic they were using, and that's very fun for flavor. But it made for a very strange like game balance. So now we're moving to a newer paradigm where trees are either they're martial trees for like melee and ranged, they're hybrid trees where they support spellcasting utility and also like melee and range, and then there are spellcasting trees that only support casting spells and do not necessarily really boost your like melee and ranged ability. And then the fourth category, Unyielding Sentinel, is just for Unyielding Sentinel, and it's got weird numbers, but we left those weird numbers in place.
wow.
And so there's a brief interlude for a chart, and
Yeah, I
then we're
saw that.
adjusting. Yeah.
As an
uh,
Unyielding Sentinel fan, I think I came out ahead on this whole thing.
Yeah, it's definitely
So
got the strongest of that, but
yeah,
it's also got it's very it's relatively niche in its particular use case,
hmm
and like we do want tanks in Unyielding Sentinel to feel bulky,
yeah,
so we ended up leaving it in its own kind of category.
yeah, yeah. All right. So I think we've talked enough about Fate Singer here. Let's go to Magus of the Eclipse. It's been, well, as you state here in the notes, the first to get a significant overhaul to its structure, to give more traditional spellcasters a way to utilize the whole tree. I guess, can you expound on that a little bit? What do we mean by that?
Absolutely. So Magus's Destiny Mantle was unusual in that it was an automatic damage proc, but it had a relatively short area. What I would call is a traditional Destiny Mantle for spellcasters is one that rides along with your spellcasts, offering extra bursts of damage in a specific element. So, like Primal Avatar, Draconic Incarnation, and the Exalted Angel, like on damage aura, they give you extra bursts of damage that skills with the stats that are in this tree. And Magus's was the odd one out. It also had a lot of summon-based stuff that was early on in the tree and related to how the Destiny Mantle interacted. So to that end, we kind of reshuffled a whole bunch of it. In that now there is a new, more generic, more generically, I would say more generically correspondent to how spellcasters play Destiny Mantle that adds a Shadow Mantle to your spellcast and does additional cold or negative damage. And we move some of the defenses out of tier 5 down into tier 4 a little bit to make them a little bit more easily acceptable. We significantly boosted the damage of Moonlance and Gloom Spear. They went from 1d6 plus 6 to 1d8 plus 8, but they were upgraded again in tier 5 to 1d12 plus 16 against enemies with 0 or less spell resistance, which is a significant portion of the enemies in the game, from what I understand. I don't know if there's some additional base spell resistance that's added from our scaling, but it's not that hard to get them down, especially with all the spell resistance debuffs in there. And if it's not, we can add more until we reach that happy medium. But we thought it was a cool way of saying this really is focused on. It's focused on spell penetration, it's focused on spell resistance debuffs, etc. And it's also a very, it's got a lot of magical defense. This is a significant chunk of magic resistance rating cap increase. And it does require meta magics, but if you're a spellcaster, my guess is you have a lot of those. The last bit of note is a lot of the spell power in the tree that was from the epic strikes got spread around more passively. So if you're not using those strikes, the tree as a whole is a little bit more power into it. And then the core 4, they gave a flat 7 spell resistance. That spell resistance was spread out through the previous cores. You still get 7, but you get 3 of them earlier. So it's a little bit easier to stack up your spell resistance if you're in this tree before you get to level 32.
I understand when I'm looking at some of the spell penetration notes in the Lamania preview that the overall amount of spell penetration is not necessarily going up with these changes. It's just being spread around a little bit more evenly.
Yeah, it used to give a flat 7 at level 32, and now at level 32 you're still going to get a total of 7, but one comes at level 20, one comes at level 23, and one comes at level 26, and then 4 finally at level 32. So it's lower in the tree as it's closer to the cores.
Question from chat. Does the lunar power change work on enemies you've dropped to 0 or less with Shatter Mantle?
Yes, ideally you'd be blasting them with spell resistance debuffs if they're an enemy that has spell resistance, and then at a certain point your strike is going to really get them.
All right. Macro Technic?
Yes, we swapped the cooldown of the epic strikes and the hammer time spells, which makes the strikes happen more often and the hammers less often. There's some other work that was done to this tree, but it was based off of player feedback from this very thread, in which the bonuses to Runearm proficiency, someone brought this up and I've completely lost the actual person. Normally when I see a really good suggestion, I try really hard to make sure the original suggestion is wrapped into where I let people know, because I feel like it's really important for people to feel like they're, if they suggest something that I really want them to know, I really helped. I contributed towards the sentiment. I gave this cool idea, they helped inspire this thing, and this got done, and I've completely forgot where that came from, but it was specifically Macro Technic is now going to let you use the highest of your intelligence, your wisdom, or your charisma as your Runearm spell DCs. So if you are someone who has gotten Runearm proficiency through Macro Technic, and you are not an intelligence caster, now you can use those DCs in a way that better fits your build. You no longer have to be an intelligence build in order to effectively use Runearms.
Cool. I think you called it hammer time spells.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that enhancement is called Hammer Time.
Oh, yes. There we go. Okay, the cooldowns of the hammer time spells. Okay. So I'm a 90s kid. So,
Yeah, it was a bit of a joke about that. To stop Hammer Time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was working as intended. Yeah.
Yes.
Not much to say about Divine Crusader. From what I understand, really that we didn't talk about earlier, which is the standardization of the hit points and spell points throughout the cores itself. All right, so let's move on to Exalted Angel, and this is probably the series of changes that has led to some of the biggest, loudest feedback in our forum thread here, and so we appreciate everyone's feedback on it. But one of the things that we're doing essentially with Exalted Angel is getting rid of the always-on healing aura that exists with the use of Holy Presence. We're keeping the healing that exists both as a benefit through the core there, angelic form, right? But also through a new kind of mechanic that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But we are, in fact, getting rid of the healing aura possibility through Exalted Angel. And I know that we've seen, a lot of feedback on the forums about that this week. But at least right now, well, we are definitely interested in hearing your feedback on it. And on this and other topics, I think we're pretty set on wanting to not have that always-on healing in Exalted Angel. It's just a little on the overpowered side, and something that we feel as a team really does need to be brought into adjustment. And I know that there are some other places that have always-on healing. I think in some of those cases they may, have some different circumstances that have us a little less concerned. But as we were doing this Exalted Angel pass, I think we wanted to make this change, even if it was going to be somewhat unpopular. And I think at this point, at least, we feel that we want to preserve that. Is there anything, I guess, you'd like to mention about the Exalted Angel nerf,
Yes.
as it were? Yeah.
Yes. So the there's a few things. Like, yes, you're right. That it's like there are some other passive healing things, but they absolutely were not the magnitude or the usability of this particular one. Like it is just the kind of play patterns that an ability like that created, we felt were really not good. And so ultimately, at this point, we're pretty committed to finding something else that is exciting and fun and active and inspires more of a participatory type of gameplay. That being said, we have a lot more about Exalted Angel than was in the original notes. One of the earliest points of feedback on this tree was we changed the more traditional mantle, which had an on-spell cast rider of like when you do fire damage, you do extra fire damage, light damage, extra fire damage, light damage, extra light damage, and we changed that to we pulled the blade barrier out of the epic moment and made that the destiny mantle, so that when you're casting the spells, you conjure this ring around you, and when you run into enemies or run into allies, it damages them and heals them respectively. One of the things that we got feedback about immediately was, if I don't want that kind of gameplay, can I have the original mantle back? And the answer is yes. We put the original on spellcast thing back in. It's a multi-selector with the blade barrier. So if you don't want that gameplay, you don't want to take that extra heat, you don't want to mess up that sort of stuff, you can simply select the one you have right now. We did change it slightly, so rather than a 15% chance of that damage, it just does that damage. It's going to match approximately with the damage of Draconic Incarnation and Primal Avatars, and now Magus of the Eclipse Mantle. So if you look at the Flaming Blade Barrier and you're like, I don't want to deal with that, then not to worry, you can keep that gameplay, no problem. As far as the Blade Barrier is concerned, its first pass and this first Lemania revealed a whole bunch of usability problems that we're taking a pretty extensive look at. The blade barrier itself, and it's really difficult to debug these kinds of abilities because you're moving and monsters are moving, and sometimes it's a little hard to understand where am I missing damage? Did this happen more than once? It's really hard to slow that simulation down and figure out what's going on. The big thing that's missing for this barrier kind of gameplay, in my opinion, is some sort of sustained pulse for enemies that remain inside of it, because it seems a little strange that if you're inside the big burning ring that you're actually completely fine. So we're probably going to be adjusting some of the actual the script work inside of how that ability functions, so that you can keep enemies or allies inside of that ring and keep them buffed and keep them healed, and keep those enemies debuffed and keep them damaged, without having to run into them repeatedly, which is very difficult and sometimes doesn't work. Sometimes monsters don't behave the way that you think they're behaving. So it should be a lot easier to use in preview 2.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and another there's a whole bunch of other smaller buffs that went into this, like the epic strikes both got a relatively moderate damage increase. The epic moment got changed because the blade barrier was taken out of the epic moment and put it at the mantle. So now the epic moment makes your single target cures work on everybody in the instance. There's no distance, there's no line of sight. If you cast a Cure Light Wounds on any target, it's going to heal your entire party with your Cure Light Wounds. And another a big change to that also is when you raise people from the dead, they always come back with full HP, just like True Resurrection. So you can throw out like smaller amounts of raise and get the full boost of this.
Or
The
if
last
you've, like,
part,
let's say, for example, that you play a cleric frequently and you've accidentally wiped the entire party. It's nice
yes,
because then I can cast Raise Dead, Resurrection, and True Resurrection, and they all basically get the same benefit.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's the in our minds, this epic moment, we really wanted to be like if you really need to save the party, kind of a thing. It'd be really fun. And then there's one last piece that I'm still building, but it was a suggestion from the forums that was so fun that like immediately I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. Someone posted this and they were like, what if it let you turn anything, like turn undead,
Hmm.
but it works on anything. And we like, what if the epic moment you press turn undead and it blows up like
Well,
everybody
you
near
know
you?
I'm down for that. I mean, we might need to consider it though, right? Because you can get some pretty good turn on dead. You know,
I
I know that there's
it's tough in high we like
yeah.
it's like this is such a vestige of a really an earlier era of our original plans of the design for DDO where this still uses a lot of like out of the book scaling where it counts hit dice which a player will see as the CR of a monster.
Hmm.
Now there is going to be another thing in here in which the enhancement in an Exalted Angel that grants you turn undead if you didn't have it already is also going to let you use your character level instead of your cleric level for turn undead, which is going to be a pretty significant boost. Like that's a pretty big buffer to your maximum hit dice from turned. And like honestly, just the idea of turn anything, I think
I
that's
mean, I
so
love it.
fun.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's great. So I'm very excited for that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Quick question about holistically here. Great question, by the way, Yob Sagath. When these changes are deployed, does that mean everyone's Epic Destiny trees are going to get reset? Do we need to reselect this stuff? Probably,
Um,
right?
it, it, Probably it depends. So the automatic reset that like when you log in and your enhancements have changed and they reset all that stuff, we actually don't control that in a very literal sense. Essentially, when you log back in again, it's going to compare your point spread in the old, like your spread of points that you've placed in your trees to the current data that is in the game. And if those two puzzle pieces don't exactly fit in a way that would still like end up with a positive normal balance, it's going to flush your points and let you reselect them for free. So like with the amount of work that's going into some of these trees, I would say it's almost a guarantee that since everything's in a different place, it's going to force reset those. So the answer is probably.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we'll have time to get into any chat questions, but I guess let's move on from Exalted Angel.
Yes.
It's a very popular tree, and it's in part because of its current power levels. So,
Yes, we
Grandmaster of
do.
Flower. Oh, yep. Sorry about that. Was
We
it?
yeah we do have. I think that there's definitely like we're aware this is a controversial thing, and like I do want to reiterate like voicing your firm like your constructive feedback on this. That's what we want. We really want you to participate and feel like you're adding to the discussion and making sure that your feedback is being heard. So like absolutely like we know it's controversial and like we really do want Exalted Angel to feel good, but like thank you for all of the awesome constructive feedback on this tree and others.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For Grandmaster of Flowers, it looks relatively smaller in scope in terms of the changes.
Yeah, it's mostly just buffs. Like the core abilities got more HP. The Drifting Lotus, like we gave more power to Drifting Lotus. Epic or Orchid Blossom got buffed a little bit in its damage, and we fixed two pretty key bugs. Orchid Blossom was straight up just not scaling with range power, which is just an oversight on my part. It's just like the checkbox was not checked, and I really thought it was checked. So check that checkbox. And Orchid Blossom had a cool thing in it where the force damage was meant to be doubled against tainted creatures, and we actually fixed that bug, so now it just does that. The downside is now it puts immune over everything, so I've got to figure out how to make that feedback look less bad. But so there's a little bit of outstanding work on that. But overall, both of those strikes got a pretty sizable buff.
Yep. All right. And Dreadnought is similar to the other one recently, where it was really just part of the core hit point, spell point changes in terms of changes to legendary Dreadnought. So let's move on. Shadow Dancer is getting a little bit more. You're beefing up the mantle, boosting the epic strikes.
Yes. So the Epic Strike's cooldown got significantly decreased, which also really interacts with the buffs that correspond to it. So like the Epic Strike, like when you do Shadow Dancer Epic Strike, it gives you a series of awesome buffs, and before they lasted less than the cooldown, and now they last more than the cooldown, which is a huge paradigm shift in the usability of the tree. The strike becoming a lightning bolt. Sadly, I could not figure that out, and Torque actually had to help me with it, because apparently lightning bolt's very complicated in our game. But it also, like, not only with like the cooldown adjustment, making it a multi-target drastically increases its utility, which I'm quite happy about. Yes, there's a whole bunch of other quality of life stuff. Shadow Mastery, the Epic Moment. No longer, you don't have to like wave your arms around anymore.
Okay.
You just activate it, which is very fun. The spell Weird is now properly spell-like ability. It doesn't go into your spellbook anymore, which is a huge boost for people who are not pure casters. So before you had to be able to cast your highest tier of spell, and now it's just in the tree, which really helps hybrid builds. The debuff attack, that's the alternative to Weird, consumed by shadows, now applies significantly more debuff. So it applies the Shadow Loss debuff from your Epic Strike and 3 stacks of Darkness from your the First Blood feat, when you have that First Blood. And then there's a new Tier 5. The buffs towards the mantle from the Tier 5 have actually been moved down to the Tier 2. And so that shadowy VFX is much lower in the tree. And the new Tier 5 grants you temporary hit points per sneak attack dice when you kill someone. So it's a lot of sustain, especially if you're racking up the sneak attack dice, and there's a lot of sneak attack dice in the tree. So we're really trying to boost up the top little bits of that tree a little bit, and there's reduce a little bit if you're in the tree but you're not using the mantle. We wanted to free up some of that space a little bit, so there's more of the trees proportionally for everything else.
Okay. Fury of the Wild. I use Great Leveler. I don't know how often other people use it, but I use Great Leveler a fair amount. But it looks like they're going to get a no-save 2-second knockdown, even if they fail the 6-second one?
Yeah, so it's like, even if you don't have the trip skills, this at the very least is going to trip something. We slightly adjusted Adrenaline's cooldown and went from 8 seconds to 9 seconds. And then the rest of the changes are all about quick cut. So its animation got improved, which is now it does 2 hits in a 360-degree area. It always applies the cutter debuff, even if you're not already quick. So before you had to get quick, then you do cutter, and now it just always gives you quick and always does cutter. And then the actual cutter damage got slightly reduced because it's a lot easier to apply, and you apply it to a lot more creatures. And it became slashing damage, not bane, which rarely comes up. I think because as a damage over time, I don't necessarily think it goes through PRR, but I actually do not know. But either way, you're stacking it up a lot faster now, and you stack it up to more creatures now. So honestly, it to me seems like a pretty sizable increase in usability.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds pretty good. Primal Avatar isn't really ready yet, but
yes,
it's coming. That's the
yeah.
intention.
That was.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite get that in, and actually only just finished that yesterday. There's a few smaller adjustments. Essentially, Stormcatcher's damage increased. Spring to Summer damage sort of increased, as in 1d6 plus 6 is actually greater than 2d6. But I honestly think we might have a little bit more flex on that. And the big thing is that Carrion Swarm is getting a saving throw on an interval. So you might be able to get the initial damage, but on an interval, they're going to have to save against your spellcasting ability in order for that dot to continue. And we're also fixing a damage bug with it. Its damage was calculated incorrectly, so we're going to actually adjust this so that it is 1d6 plus 1 for every 2 character levels in both acid and poison. And before, his numbers just didn't make any sense, and now it's going to actually follow the formula that it is.
Okay. Shiradi Champion. I
Yes.
don't know much about this one, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the debut of a really cool new feature, Exploding Arrows.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
and I'm actually quite proud of that. If all of you have not seen it on Lamania, they are really fun. It's just really, really, really cool. We've historically had a really hard time getting AoE attacks to work for ranged because when you're doing a melee attack, you swing your weapon, but behind the scenes, your character is drawing a hitbox. Like, we do a little hit scan, and then we deploy an attack directly from you to anything we catch. A projectile is actually created in a ranged attack, because we don't hit scan our ranged attacks. We actually create an arrow, and the arrow flies, and that's how you get that good ranged combat. And the problem is that by the time the arrow has hit the enemy, it's kind of lost the player. Is the long and short of it. We had a really hard time connecting that package data back to the originator. And so as part, the whole missile creation process is fraught with peril. But Steelstar was able to finally crack the case, and so we have a relatively seamless AoE range solution that does not involve creating multiple projectiles. I know historically, when we introduced an ability like Scattershot, there's some usability problems with how we envisioned the ability to go. Creating multiple projectiles in a row in DDO is not great. The game makes an assumption on a fundamental level that a single ability is going to create one thing, and having something create more than one thing really confuses some of the interconnected part. But yes, Shiradi Champion in general, some of its tier 5 got easier to use if you're a general ranged person. Some of the things that required bows no longer require bows. Now it's just any ranged thing in general. The core 4 got completely replaced. Before it was a charm when you use the epic strike, and now it is giving you saves for spells versus favorite enemies, and a mini shot charge. This is a bit of outstanding feedback, as the players have rightfully pointed out. Hey, Shiradi Champion has a relatively significant spellcasting component, and that's not really being reflected in the new core 4. And to that we say, you're right. We'll work on that. So that's on the to-do list of how to help Shiradi out a little bit. And yeah. And Phaelites now actually does force damage, like scaling with force spell bar. So if you are a force caster, you actually have a damaging spell in here. And Phaelites is no joke. I think it's a little overshadowed for the ranged capabilities of the tree, but it is quite good. And now with damage, it's quicker to CC, and now with damage, it's going to be even better. So I'm quite happy with all of that. But yeah, and then Unyielding Sentinel, nothing. Absolutely nothing. We did rearrange it, and then we unrearranged it a little bit as players played with it a little bit on Lamania, and they were like, the tier 4 and tier 5 have non-Destiny Mantle buffs in them, so probably shouldn't require the Destiny Mantle if you don't want to run with the Destiny Mantle. And I'm like, yep, that makes total sense. So I've unhooked the top 2. But the majority of the changes that tree got were entirely cosmetic, so switching around icons, switching around reordering stuff, adding prereq arrows, etc., etc. But to my knowledge, no functional changes at this point. Although, like with everything, we're always really, really hoping for that lovely feedback. So if you really love Unyielding Sentinel, and you've got a burning suggestion or a bug that you just really, really, really hope that we like a look at, or some other cool idea, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
I I have an Unyielding Sentinel I play and I like a lot, so that's my feedback.
It's beefy.
Yeah,
It's a beefy tree.
yeah.
I really like how the shield throw came out. I think that's actually one of the most satisfying abilities in the entire game.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Um,
that's the long and short of it.
Before we move on to other topics from Epic Destinies, I wanted to give the Twitch chat a chance to just sort of throw some questions our way if you'd like, and we'll see what we can do to answer them here. You did talk a little bit about minimum caster level on Epic Strikes a little bit earlier. Is there anything we want to reiterate there that's being done
Yeah,
holistically?
yeah. It's like there are some abilities that have max caster levels above 20, and those are very few and far between. We're really trying to stick to a damaging standard just so we can be really sure that these abilities are matching up against each other. Um, so like they all should match at this point. We don't really want an ability to end up with an unlisted like significantly stronger scaling than anything else.
Yeah.
Um,
Question from chat about Great Leveler's animation. Can it scale with attack speed?
I do not know. I don't actually know how things scale with attack speed. I have no idea how that works. So I don't know.
All right, we'd have to look into it. So, will Shadow Dancer's epic strikes be adjusted to have what Corsair describes as better synergy with repeaters and dual shooters? ICD on Dark Imbuement means only one bolt is affected.
Yes. So that's been kind of a balanced bugbear in our bonnets, as it were, where in order to prevent things that apply in a large area, like for example, because Dark Imbuement also works on spells. In order to prevent something like a fireball from hitting everyone rather than one thing, we apply a cooldown on the damage proc. This is very similar to the cooldown on other, like on Destiny mantles, where it's like this can proc once every 5 seconds. You know what I mean? And the side effect is that there are weapons that hit for more than once every second, and we have sometimes we can't really realistically split the difference with the tech we have without really getting into the weeds about like, well, should repeaters have the proc more than once per second, etc., etc. Like repeaters, you know, and the dual crossbows from Inquisitive, they have extra bolts, but like the amount of extra damage that like a sheath adds from like Dark Improvement, um, it really would make it so that if you're not using a multi-hit weapon, like that's like, you know, does 4 times the damage as if you're just using a regular crossbow. And we're not really sure if we want to commit to that kind of disparity.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I like Mediyouth Double O's question, although I suspect this would be a challenging task. A way to bind your fire rune arm. So to fire your rune arm, bind it to the action bar instead of having to reserve a key for it. I imagine that's a bit of a can of worms.
Maybe. I mean,
Because if I could
I
just
don't
press 1 to
know.
fire my rune arm or whatever instead of having to bind a key, that could be pretty cool.
That could be pretty cool. We could
Yeah.
give it to you for free the same way we give you that feat for like the automatic rune arm recharge.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting.
I don't. That's a pretty good suggestion. Like that's not bad. I will see what I can do, though no promises. Rune arms are very strange.
Well, I always assume when we start going to like key binding actions that it would be kind of fairly complex to sort of adjust, but you know.
Yeah. In this particular case, though, I think all I would need to do is make a feat that fires the rune arm, and then give you that feat
Yeah.
underneath the rune arm auto charge. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'll see what I can do. No promises.
Canicus wants us to add tumble to that list of things you could hotbar as well.
Oh,
That'd be
that's very difficult. Secretly,
yeah.
tumble is actually 4 different things.
Oh
Like
yeah.
tumble left, tumble right, tumble forward, tumble back. There is no tumble,
Oh, that's true.
unfortunately.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of rune arms, since they are not spells, can they ignore spells that nullify lower level spells? So, yeah, like some of the auras and things that'll nullify at level 4 and under spells?
Um, from a flavor perspective, I would say no, because they are casting, like, the rune arm is a magical device that casts that magical spell. Like, just because it's not coming out of your hands, like, I would say probably not. I know their caster levels scale with the charge tier. Um, so it's like the mental invulnerability is at level 4 and below or 5 or below. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I was going to say
Um,
4, but I might be wrong.
I think it's 4.
Yep.
In that particular case, then theoretically a maximum charged rune arm would do it. Caster level doesn't help. It is spell level. Interesting. That's right. Caster level doesn't help. It is spell level. You're completely correct.
Yep.
I actually think that I can fix that. Because, and this is part of why rune armors are so complicated, each individual charge tier actually casts a different spell. So you have to make 6 spells for every rune arm because there actually has to be a spell for tier 0 for an unknown reason. Um, so genuinely, that actually might be fixable, and that would make sense. Like if the maximum tier rune arm got through it because it's a level 5 spell, that makes total sense to me. Um,
That's
I'm
cool.
just before I embarrass myself further, I'm gonna Google mantle invulnerability because
Well, chat's saying it's 4 and below.
is it 4 and below?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hope it's 4 and below.
yeah.
Yeah, 4 and below. So yeah, then theoretically speaking, then a maximum charge tier runner, I would say my flavor judge says yes, that should work. I'll make it work. Um,
All right. Well, we didn't have a ton of stuff coming up in chat here in these most recent minutes, so let's talk just a little bit about some of the other work that you've done related to tooltips and UI and things like that. Well, I saw a line here in the preview notes I wanted to ask you about. It says all action lines other than description are now in a bulleted list. And so I guess my question is, what's an action line?
I just made up that terminology, so I'm not surprised no one else but me knows what that is.
Okay.
So I just made that up, but they are called that in the code where essentially there's two parts to a tooltip. There is automatically generated stuff that is pulled from the data of the action, and then there's the stuff that we type in that happens at the bottom. So automatically generated stuff involves things like spell point cost. We don't type in the blue spell point cost 15, you know what I mean? The game takes the wheel. We type in 15 into the spell point cost field, and then the tooltip pulls that information out and formats that nicely and puts that into the tooltip. And this is another significant expansion on that automatic technology to pull even more information out of what an action is. An action here meaning like any active or even passive ability from your enhancements, from your feats, from your spells, like anything that's like on your hotbar, pulling more information out of that so that more of it's automatically generated and more of it can be context sensitive. Like for example, a big point of a confusion is that we built out things that automatically give you eschew materials, or just eschew materials in general. But if you have that feat, it does not tell you on the hotbar. It just says you don't have the materials because you don't have them. You have eschew materials. And then so players, through no fault of their own, look at this and they go, "This must not be working." Like I'm still seeing red text saying I need this stuff. It doesn't work, and that's a conveyance error. That's a problem with how we presented our information. So a big part of the change is like now it's going to look at your feats. It's going to say, "Do you have eschew materials? Does this spell qualify for it?" Um,
Mm-hmm.
and build that out dynamically, and we'll let you know when you're eligible for that sort of stuff. And it's also removed a whole bunch of bad information. Like if you're a spell, before we had this thing where every single spell had either spell resistance yes or spell resistance no, and now it just says spell resistance if it has yes, and it doesn't say spell resistance no and everything without spell resistance because it doesn't. It doesn't. We don't need to tell everybody no. We can just tell them when there is a spell resistant thing. And upon poking into it, there's, I believe, one exception to this, where the spell implosion, because the spell is cast by an invisible thing that follows you, and that we're gonna figure that out. So, but that otherwise works really well. Um, And we also fixed two really big bugs in terms of DCs.
Yeah.
One of them was just a display information problem where druid abilities, these are spells in the druid spellbook that you have to be in animal form to cast that are actually attacks, like bait and bite, where your wolf like bites people, but it's still technically a spell and it goes in your spellbook. Those DCs were all kinds of wrong, and now they are correct. Now they actually pull from your stats correctly and they pull from the action correctly, so we connected those dots and those work. And the other bug is certain types of projectile spells just did not get your player information correctly, and the tooltip was correct, and the projectile was wrong. So a whole bunch of projectile spells, especially in Epic Destinies, are actually going to get a non-insignificant boost to their DCs by finding this bug, by doing this tooltip information. So that is I cannot state this enough. That was a huge bug to find, and we're really happy that we stumbled upon this. And it's not everything. It is only specifically spells with a DC and a projectile where the DC is overridden on the feat level but not on the spell level. So it's like this is like we're talking 5 things total, but it's like it's such a specific thing, like a combination of individual properties. But we did, in fact, reach a dead end where those numbers just weren't connecting, and we were able to track that down. We figured it out. So now everything in the whole game, if it shows a DC, should show the correct DC. That should match what's in the combat log. It should match what's on the player. So that whole we can close the door on that whole adventure.
Speaking of closing the door on things, though, there's one other thing. Yes. This is just from the regular preview notes that I wanted to bring up in chat here, which is that we've done some work on the LFM UI to do a thing, which is that it's supposed to automatically load the who list. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, that's pretty risky.
Are you saying that there will no longer be broken LFMs in the game?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I really do hope so.
Yeah.
I understand why the original change was made. Like that asynchronous load of all of the wanted list information. That's a big client hitch, and it's a big client hitch whenever you load into the game. And that being said, it's like it really did feel like a little bit of an oversight on our part that you could get to the grouping information page without that load being completed. And so we shifted that around so that now when you open up the social panel, it's going to show you the grouping page and it's going to start that load, and you're going to be able to see that information get populated the same way you would see it if you started scrolling on the who list. So that should really help people see accurate information, and I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know why this change was made, that initially required kind of a loading of the who list manually by the end user, and it was to prevent an issue where people would need to log in twice, oftentimes just due to character data bloat. So we had to find ways to lower that footprint, as it were, and that was one of the ways that we did it. So
yes.
Yep.
Yes, I'm like, I know tooltip stuff is probably not the most marketable of changes. Like I don't think this is really going to be the highlight of anyone's patch notes but me, but I'm really happy about the how the tooltips came out. I feel like the bulleted presentation makes them a lot more readable. And like the more information that is sourced directly from the ability, the more we can find and stumble upon data errors, like errors like where we've put the wrong place, like the wrong numbers in the wrong place. Like when putting this out and testing this out on my machine, it's like stumbling upon a whole bunch of tiny little bugs that I've been able to fix. And it's like now when a player says, hey, this ability has the wrong cost, they can show us and I can be like, oh my gosh, you're totally right. And I know that information is accurate because it's pulled directly from the game. So I'm really stoked about that. I'm quite happy about how that came out.
All right. I know that I've got some people in chat wanting to sort of make sure that we're working on an Intimidate bug in particular. When is Intimidate going to be fixed, for example? Apparently there's an issue where the initial change of aggro is not generating its proper amount of hate. Are you familiar with this one?
I am not. I think I remember someone mentioning that on the forums relatively recently, but I haven't had a chance to dive into it. the hate system in the game is something that I have not ever looked into. I've been really too busy making Turn Undead work on everything in the last 20 minutes, but I'm so excited about that. I think it's so fun.
Yeah.
But no, I have not poked into that at all. Been that way since Update 59, so a relatively recent change that has changed that Intimidate.
Yeah, my guess
Very
is that might
interesting.
be a torque task, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, we all have different areas of expertise, and I would say Torque definitely knows the most about like aggro and that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, we've only got a few minutes here, and I do have a few other bits of news I wanted to get to before I wrap up the show. So I think I'm going to say goodbye to you, Tonquin, and I really appreciate you taking some time with me today. Thank you for joining us in chat to go over the Epic Destinies and provide some insight and just a whole lot more information than if it was just me by myself here. So thanks so much, everyone.
yeah, happy to be here. Hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.
All right, and if you'll give me a minute, I am actually going to remove you from chat here, but you'll have to give me a minute because I got to do a thing. All right,
Okay.
see ya. Hello. Timing, everybody, timing. Before I wrap up the show, I wanted to just go over a few other bits of news. Make sure that they mentioned here for this week. First off, this weekend we have a double Daily Dice XP boost. That's going through January 21st. Double Daily Dice XP is the bonus. I want to put a link in chat and make sure that you are all aware about our free questing coupon, which is back. It's going to be available through February 11th. The coupon code is FREEDDO2024. FREEDDO2024. And you'll get a ton of quest packs for free. You can find out more information about that over on DDO.com. I also did want to mention that our producer's letter is out. That got out last week. But if you've not had a chance to look at the producer's letter yet, please do so. It's really a roadmap for the year ahead. Want to mention we're still have a little time left on the 9th season of the Hardcore League. That goes until 9 a.m. on Wednesday, February 7th. So just a few weeks left for that. And then finally, I had a little bit of a sales pitch here, which is that we have brought back, just for a limited time, the Mechanized Patron's Coffer and Underdark Patron's Coffer. They're going to be available in the DDO store through February 1st. So if you missed your chance to get these coffers last time around and you want it now, make sure you get it in the DDO store through February 1st is when these are going to be available. They might come back again in the future, but it might be a while. So I would suggest picking this up then while it's here, and you can read more about that also on DDO.com. Quick programming note that I'm not going to be here next week. I'm actually on the road doing a weird thing, which should be pretty fun. That weekend I'm going to be taking part in a little esports tournament. So I got a little PTO that I'm going to be doing in the latter part of next week while I'm traveling. So I will see you in 2 weeks. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to look up before I call it a show, and that I had mentioned that at the start of the show that I wanted to see what our Lamania schedule is looking like, and it looks like it may be a couple of weeks before we've got our second preview on Lamania. Time TBD, but it looks like it might be early February for our second preview here of Update 66. One last bit before I wrap up the show, and that is next week. Starting next Wednesday, the Snow Peaks Festival is coming back, and that's going to be available through February 6th. So there's nothing new with the Snow Peaks Festival this year, but it does have both of those challenges available and some cool loot and cool bits to it as well. You can find out about the Snow Peaks Festival on DDO.com, and that's going to start on Wednesday, I think is what it's marked, is Wednesday around 10 a.m. So when we come up from the Worlds on Wednesday, Snow Peak should be up, and that'll be going through February 6th. So thanks everyone for watching the show. I will see you in 2 weeks. Have fun.